FPL is officially back this week, so in this video we're going to be talking through 6 tips to help you win your mini leagues. Last year I finished 28,349 in FPL, which is in the top 0.25% of the game. So these learnings are based on my experience over that season and will hopefully give you a few pointers for the season ahead. Tip number 1, do not wildcard in the first 2 weeks. It goes the same every season. It's the first couple of game weeks and your team hasn't got off to the start that you thought it would. Those 2 or 3 players you were eyeing up but didn't pick, meanwhile, have got off to an absolutely flying start. That wildcard button is saying, click me. Do not click that button. No one has ever won FPL wildcarding in the first 2 weeks. That wildcard is there for 2 reasons. One, it's to help you out when your team becomes untenable, too many players injured, players missing games. And secondly, it's there so that you can bring in multiple players at once if you know there are some fixtures you want to target. If you're taking the game seriously this season, you're going to want to have a wildcard strategy. This means you'll be loosely planning ahead for an idea of when you're going to be using your 2 wildcards. Now, one way to do this is to target fixture swings. For example, we've got 4 game weeks before the first international break. That's going to give us a better lay of the land, more data, and if your team has got off to a really bad start, you've got an opportunity to rethink things. Game week 9 is another. Teams like Chelsea have a great 8 first fixtures, but then they start to turn a little bit sour after game week 9. Liverpool and Villa, meanwhile, have really good fixtures around game week 9, so that might be an opportunity to bring more of their players in from then onwards. You might also want to use your wildcard to bring in players that have got a lot of double game weeks, which is much more common towards the end of the season. This tip forgoes all of your chips. They're not there for instant gratification to make you feel better once your team's had a bad couple of weeks. Tip number 2. Look at fixtures beyond game week 6. So on the topic of fixtures, when you're picking your team for game week 1, make sure you look ahead from game week 6. When you click a player on the FPL app, it shows you a summary of the player and their 3 upcoming fixtures. You want to look further ahead than this, and you want to look further ahead than game week 6. For 1, this helps you with planning your chips. But 2, it gives you an idea of how many players you're going to need to move on from game week 6. Remember, you can only carry 2 transfers at a time. So if you're needing to get rid of more than 2 players, then you're going to end up using transfers that cost you points or having to use one of your chips. Number 3. Don't book in transfers too far in advance. It can be really tempting to meticulously plan exactly when you're going to bring players in and out. But this rarely works, especially before the season started. The main reason for this is injuries. Jesus and Nkunku are the prime examples of this. Everyone has been talking about having them in their teams for weeks, and then they've both got injured just before the season starts. If you plan your transfers too far ahead, you're not accounting for injuries. We've all got Haaland and he could go and break his leg in the first game. If you've already put in a transfer for game week 1, then your plan's already gone out the window. It's fine to have ideas of players that you're going to want to bring in and out, but don't be too wedded to your plans. It's always going to change, so make sure you're agile. Number 4, sometimes you've got to go down to go up. So there's going to be game weeks where you think you've made some really smart choices and they don't pay off. As long as you're making choices that aren't too short term, i.e. you're not just bringing in a player for 1 match, then don't lose faith in your decisions. Sometimes you have to take a red arrow or 2 in a couple of game weeks to then get a green arrow the following week. That's just how the game goes, and if it gets you to where your team needs to be in the next couple of game weeks and sets you up for the following game weeks, then it's worth taking those red arrows. Number 5, save your triple captain for a double game week. It can be really tempting to use your triple captain when you know that team is playing a weak opponent. Let's take Haaland at home to Luton or Burnley. You think you're guaranteed points, a triple captain seems like a no-brainer. But before you pull the trigger, think about those double game weeks. These are much more common in the season when fixtures get cancelled and they end up stacking up in the later game weeks. So it can be difficult to plan this in advance. But just as an example, there's currently a blank midweek after game week 37. So it's highly likely that some rescheduled matches from earlier in the season are going to end up in that slot. Again, using City as the example, they face Wolves at home in game week 37. So let's say there's another weaker team in that rescheduled slot for City. You've got an ideal time to triple captain a City player, double the scoring potential than if you just used it on 1 fixture. Number 6, our final tip. Don't be too reactive. You've brought in a player that you think is going to do well over 6-7 game weeks. They start with a 1 or they get 0. They get 1 point the following week. Now, unless it's so bad that that player's getting benched, you've just got to trust the process. You brought the player in for a reason, you've done your homework. You're not going to get every decision right, but as long as your choices are the right blend of strategy, gut feeling, a bit of luck, then you can't go too far wrong. You don't want to overthink things, you don't want to use too many transfers where you're losing points as a result, and you definitely don't want to tinker too much. Do your homework, do your planning, and stick to your guns. That brings us to the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to be revealing my game week 1 team later this week, so if you like the video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and look out for the next one. Thanks very much, see you next time.